the it lets us focus on the conversation rather than thinking
Yes, as
about what we
opposed to my
look.
radiance.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so this is the first one that I've done like sitting at a computer that was audio only. So it's a little weird for me, um,
Ooh.
but I like it. And I can't decide what I should show on the screen for Facebook Live. Right now I'm showing just the Hive one screen,
Ah,
but I could like take notes while we talk, and that would show up on the screen. That'd be kind of funny.
oh, that'd be kind of cool. It's
But
very
yeah,
technical.
might be distracting for me. Um, let's see. Well, oh, how would you like to introduce yourself?
Well, as Matt has said, I am his cousin. I am a, how would I introduce myself? I'm a person who is a full-time graduate student and working in a school as a counselor for children. I also am an actor and someone who loves living in Mexico. I've lived in Mexico and Spain, and I love speaking Spanish and traveling. So I guess
So, did you say you were a teacher and an actor? Is that what you?
um, I have been a teacher in the past of ESL and theater, but I am currently getting my master's degree in psychology and counseling for children.
And you did say you're an actor, right?
Yes, yes, I am.
And what's the last thing you acted in?
Other than daily life, no, I'm just kidding. So when I first got back, I've been back in New York for 2 years. I was living in Mexico and I was doing lots of theater there. But the
Mm,
first thing, or rather the last thing, because full-time graduate school does not lend itself to doing a lot of side projects.
hmm
So the last piece of theater that I performed in was this thing called Rightopia Lab. It's here in New York City, and basically it's plays written by children, and then adults perform in them. So I got to be in two little vignettes that children wrote, which was really fun.
Very nice, very nice. I've never actually. I don't think I've ever seen you perform.
No, and it's interesting that you should bring up this topic, Matthew.
Because you were just thinking about how much you're upset with your relatives for not seeing your performances.
No, I had a chance in my youth to be on film and to show my acting chops, but it was denied because of possibly gender issues in our family. the
Really?
yes,
That is
my
weird.
cousins and brothers were in something called the Mad Bombers, and they created stories. And every Christmas would, in summer, they would film these epic, bring their scripts to life on camera. And I was never allowed to participate.
Wow, that sounds like your cousins were really creative with
Well,
this.
that's one way to spin it. Yes, they were.
And
Yes,
and
they were very creative.
and so you're saying your skills weren't up to par at that time for them to let you into the show?
Well, I believe that that's how you manipulated this conversation. But perhaps I was observing how not to be an actor, and then forward into life and acquired, got an undergraduate degree in theater, and then went on from there.
Oh, geez. Well, so you brought up the Mad Bombers. Hmm. So, well, all right. So, there are some interesting things to talk about that since. So, well, for the audience,
Yes.
the Mad Bombers was it was like the A team. It was this, right? It was created by myself and Carrie's brother Michael and my brother Tim Timothy, and we created these three characters that we all played, and we wrote. It started with just writing stories about these guys. We called them Mad Bombers, which I don't know why we were called them the Mad Bombers because we never bombed anything.
I
Uh,
know that's true.
but it was basically like the A Team, and our nemesis was the Red Baron and Bigfoot. And eventually it evolved into, once we had a VHS camera, we started making videos. And Carrie here, she begged us to be in the videos, but no, that's not quite
But I
what happened.
simply was not allowed. In fact, I begged so much that they said I was harassing them, and then that changed into calling me Harasi. So I did actually have a name and a mention on occasion in the Mad Bombers as Harasi.
Yes, yes, that was you're known as, and you're still called Harasi to this day, aren't you?
I am. And you know what? I have to say I like it.
It's kind of a cool name. I don't call you it, but I do hear you called it.
It probably
um,
comes up like if I were sitting next to you right now and I called your cell phone, it would be like Harasi calling.
no, no, it would not. Um, so yeah, and it is true. Uh, we were young boys and not nice to sisters and female cousins all that much, and we didn't really let any women, any girls into the show, other than as maybe reference to like some maybe some jokes.
Yes, exactly. I believe that is exactly correct.
Yeah, but and so I guess I'll just formally apologize for not letting you into the show. Although I'm sure I campaigned to get you into the show, and it was other people that blocked you.
Potentially. But look at where we're making up for lost time because now you're having me on your show now.
Yeah, and Michael and Tim have never been on the show,
There
so
you go.
yeah. Um, cool. Let's see. Well, let's go to the question I have to ask everyone, and then we'll see where
Okay.
we go. So, Carrie, do you consider yourself an activist?
An activist, like a political activist.
Well, whatever you think the word activist means, do you consider yourself that?
Um, yes and no, I guess would be my answer. I consider myself, especially with the current election that came up, people talked a lot, especially people who were very angry by the outcome, spoke a lot about things and like what to do and what is activism and how can we speak up and be advocates. But I think my activism comes in a different manner, maybe not like what you would think. Like I'm not out with a picket sign, but I did go to the March on Washington.
Hmm.
So in some ways, I do consider myself active, but I think that my activism comes in my work, which is working with young children to help create tolerance and acceptance and safe spaces and creating dialogue and giving children and marginalized groups like a voice, through my counseling work and also through theater. I go to Mexico in the summers and I work with children who are in poverty and children with disabilities. And it's really about like bridging things instead of building walls. So I guess in that way, I'm an activist, like working with children to try to, it's harder to change adults'
Yeah.
perceptions, especially if they've been conditioned or, we all have biases. But I think working with children and helping them learn tolerance and acceptance and self compassion is my activism.
Yeah. Well, it's making a big impact on the world, on their world.
Yeah, hopefully.
Sure. Cool. But you went to the Women's March.
Um, I think it's hard for people to do the work in terms of if we're constantly on our devices, if we're looking at YouTube videos and watching Netflix and falling asleep to Netflix, and the first thing people do is check their phone in the morning when they wake up. And on the subway, if I look around, it's like a sci-fi, like Ray Bradbury novel. Like no one's looking except anywhere but their phones. It's kind of creepy. And
You really want people to talk to each other on the subway?
I mean, on the subway, no. Okay, you have a point. That I'll give you, but I don't know. Just the work that's really hard is like sitting with ourselves and tuning everything else out and just going inward, and seeing what rises up and what comes up and learning how to like experience it and not push it away and just kind of like experience it and then kind of like let it go, like that impermanence. And I did a 10-day silent meditation, if you can believe it.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that.
It's a Vipassana. So it's 10 days and it's free. They have them all over the world and all over the United States and stuff.
And how many hours a day do you meditate?
Oh my God, so many. Like you wake up at 4:30 in the morning and you're meditating basically until like 9 p.m., which is, I mean, there's breaks and there's like breakfast and lunch.
And no talking, right?
No, zero, none. Except at the end of the evening, people could go and ask the like teacher a question, and then you could at one point in the week ask a question to the teacher. And of course you could talk if it was a necessity. I mean, if there was something really wrong or you had to communicate something, there's like staff that are there that you could talk to if you had to.
Mm-hmm.
So 10 days is a long time because you can't write. So it's not even like you could be like writing in a journal or you're not reading a book. Like you're just there.
They wouldn't let you go write on breaks?
No, you're not supposed to write anything because the whole point is that you have feelings or you have these thoughts and then you kind of like let them go, like things rise up and then you kind of let them go. And it's very difficult, but it's really brilliant because for all of that time, like you kind of go in these like dips and waves of like, okay, I'm present and I'm able to do this. And then, oh my God, my mind's drifting. And then you also learn so much about like projections, like how much we project onto other people. And like again, it's like this obsessive thinking. And also if you get back to power, like the power that we give other people in terms of, there was this woman who slept next to me and meditated behind me the entire time. And I was like so annoyed by her for like the first 5 days. I was like, she was like moaning and groaning and she snored. Oh my God, she snored. Snoring's like a deal breaker for me. She snored so loud. And we were already getting up at like the bell would ring at 4 a.m. I was like, I'm going to kill this. This is awful. And I just like, I was obsessively giving her this power, right? Like, and then there was another girl there who I just, for some reason, was convinced she hated me. I'm like, that girl hates me. Meanwhile, we don't talk. Like, what? And it's amazing because like around day 5, the woman who was making all this noise, because I did go, you're supposed to go once to talk to the like guru teacher guy.
Yeah.
So I said to him, I was like, there's this woman who's making a lot of noise, like extraneous noise that is not part of like the power of silence that we said we would do. And he just looked at me and he was like, yeah, I'm not going to say anything to her. Part of your work here is that you have to learn to give it less importance. Because it's true, right? Like we live in cities, we live in these places where there's distractions and things, but we have to like learn to not give it the power and tune it out. And after he said that to me, and then I saw her break down, like she had this moment where she was like crying and talking to and like everybody was connecting to her. She was saying what everybody was probably feeling. And I just felt this compassion for her. And then afterwards, like for the next, 4 or 5 days, I really didn't hear her anymore. And I was wondering, I'm like, is that because I just gave it less importance? Is it because she was doing different work? But it was kind of amazing. And then on the last day when we were allowed to talk to everybody, the girl who I had told myself and was convinced that she hated me was so nice. She came up to me. She's like, hey, how are you? So much of it is just like, we're so in our heads. And that's why I think the connection constantly to that stimulation of like social media isn't good because I don't know. I mean, it is powerful. It can be used as a tool, but I just think a lot of it just keeps us disconnected and into ourselves mostly.
Yeah. Well, I wrote a book all about how I think everyone really should meditate. It's like if you want to be happy and really, get a feel for
Absolutely.
what actually makes you happy and what really makes you happy and what's just an addiction, then meditation is like the healthiest practice that I know of. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, but I have not done a 10-day meditation retreat. I've done like a 4 or 5 day one, um, and I
Well,
go
it's a
to
long time to
yeah
commit. I mean, I was only able to do it when I lived in Mexico. I couldn't have done that in my New York days because I didn't have the time off. And,
yeah.
or, if you get a 10-day vacation, you don't really want to spend it sitting on a cushion necessarily.
Well, until you meditate enough that you recognize how good that makes you feel. Um,
Yeah, that's true.
yeah, it's but the meditation retreats that I go to, they are not so strict. I'm not really good with rules and hard and fast rules, and so the meditation retreats I go to, you can, it is usually silence, but you're actually encouraged to journal, and I find that really valuable for my process. And
Absolutely. I
yeah,
really wish that I could have. I almost like wanted to like sneak pieces of paper. I was like going to be like a secret writer, like, but then
yeah.
I stayed in. I understand why they have you do it. It was definitely an incredible experience, one I would never want to do again. But
Yeah, I mean, I totally can understand the idea of not talking ever again. I've heard of lots of spiritual gurus and things that have just stopped talking, and they might like communicate through just writing or writing on a chalkboard or something. But I totally get that. I could see myself not ever talking again.
it'll take away the whole small talk issue that you have. Well, and
Yeah,
also then you could, the less you talk, the more, it's kind of like maybe you could even commune with aliens because you'd be way more in tune. Have you seen on, speaking of Netflix and social media,
hmm.
now I'm a hypocrite. I'm like, wow, have you seen the latest? No. Have you seen Black Mirror?
Oh yeah, I love Black Mirror. I mean, that's like I think some of the best television that's been made.
It's so good. So the episode, I think it's the first episode in season 3.
Hmm.
Um, it's with the people constantly rating each other.
I like skipped that episode. For some reason I like couldn't get into it and so I skipped it.
Oh,
But
it's painful to watch, but I mean, to me, that speaks volumes about like in the near future where our society is headed.
yeah, I mean it's already going on. There's so much rating and reputation uh on
I mean, people wait for the likes, and they say that like when your cell phone goes off and makes those noises, it's like the same as dopamine. It releases like dopamine in the brain. That's kind of like basically being like a drug addict. But
yeah.
I just remember the name of the episode for any listeners or aliens that might be curious. It's called Nosedive,
Mm,
and but it's true. It's like people just walk around like rating each other, and some people, I didn't even realize that this is a thing. See, I'm in school with all these like millennials, they're so young,
yeah.
and they were talking about like something like the 100 club where people freak out. Like this one girl was like, I have a friend who will put a picture on Facebook, and if she doesn't get at least 100 likes, she takes it down. It's like this weird, I know, right? It's like this constant validation. They need this constant validation, and it's kind of twisted. It's so sad because I see people. I live in New York City. Obviously, I see a ton of tourists taking pictures, and I feel like even the way people take pictures now, it's not to remember a beautiful present moment with their friends and loved ones, but it's more like this is going to be a good, on Instagram, or like, it's just crazy. It's like, so people are even like shaping. That's why that episode is good. It's like, it's called Nosedive. I highly recommend it.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely something that people need to learn how to have an enlightened experience of social media, and um, it's interesting because reputation and voting are, I think, two incredibly important technologies we now have access to on a global scale,
Yeah, but it
using the
still
internet.
didn't stop Trump. No, I'm just kidding.
We haven't mastered it. We're
Yeah,
still in our infant
clearly.
stages. But
Basically, society went to shit as soon as the selfie stick was invented.
yeah. But you have a choice. You have a choice of how seriously you take your online reputation. I sold some of my wife's boots on eBay, and I've been on eBay like since it was created, and so but I don't really care if I have a great reputation on there, and I sold these boots, and the person who bought them, it took me like a week before I shipped them out, just because I had other things to do and it wasn't that big a priority, and I shipped it out to the person, and they sent me this because they were like, "Where is it? You haven't sent me any?" And I was like, I sent them the tracking info, and they're like, "You didn't ship it until 5 days after I bought it.
Oh my
You
God.
should refund me my shipping costs for the inconvenience." And I just ignored them. It's just like, I guess they might give me a bad rating, but it's like I'm not Walmart, I'm not like, I don't care if your experience shopping with me was all that great, you know.
Yeah, but it's because again, we're just in a society of instant gratification. Like people expect things immediately, whether it's those boots or a like on their profile picture or,
Yeah.
whatever it is. Like even, I think about when we were little. I'm sorry, I'm so glad. Like some days I'm like, I feel so old. Oh my God, I'm like middle aged. And then mostly I'm like, yes, thank God I'm a Gen Xer, not a millennial. Um, like I remember like when we were little and we wanted to record a song, like our favorite song,
Yeah.
we'd have to sit by the and listen to the radio, like, with our hand on like play and record at the same time. And I remember in 7th grade, I lied to my mother and walked like an hour to the mall to buy the single of a song that I liked. And now kids can just go on like, whatever, iTunes and buy it instantaneously. And there's something, they can Shazam it. I don't know. Look, I'm not totally like, there's a lot of great things about accessibility and information, but I also just think that it's instant gratification thing of like people just, if you send a text to somebody now, they expect like an answer right away. I mean, it's awful. You can even see when people checked it, if it was online, like, I don't know.
I just think, we have to learn how to deal with these tools and these abilities, and then we can design tools that give the level of transparency we want to give. But I totally agree, these are really difficult. These are like all new types of addictions, all new types of challenges that anyone born today has to figure out. I mean, I feel lucky. I mean, we did have TV growing up, and that was, man, I was addicted to TV.
Really?
Yeah, I watched so much TV and movies over and over again as a kid. So I feel lucky that my brain works as well as it does, considering.
Yeah, but I think to counter that, to be fair, our generation was like, we didn't have war going on. We didn't have like as many unsafe conditions perhaps. And I don't know, we were out riding bikes. We were still out playing epic, neighborhood games of hide and go seek. And sure, there was bullying, but we didn't have cyberbullying. I mean, I think I was totally bullied in elementary school, and I think I would have been dead if like people could take that to the next level and put it on, social media. So I think it's, in terms of activism, I think that activism comes in many forms. And I think part of activism is like learning how to be more present and helping people navigate, especially children, navigate this new world order or like culture that they've inherited.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think it's going to get more crazy. I think we're just at the tip of the iceberg of how crazy technology is going to change our world.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I think that part of the activism is also, again, being an activist about, sure, social justice and all of these issues, but also being an activist for what do you call it? Like inner peace. I don't know, for being present, like to be fighting against some of, I almost feel like parents nowadays have to be hardcore activists just to get their kids less connected to all of these options.
Yeah. Well, for me, and I sort of explore that thread in my book, I talk about meditation is really just a type of activism in your own mind. It's like saying, all right, we're going to be still here, and we're going to let everything in the mind sort of churn away and speak its piece until everything calms down and gets quiet, and then we'll see what we're left with and what we want to do. And so it's just sort of a type of personal activism, and then And then for me, it helps me see how to be active in other people's lives and the world more clearly.
Absolutely. Clarity. And then
Yeah.
also, we're not such a joke to the aliens watching above. They're like, well, look at those fools.
Or they just see us as children. Or they're still learning. They're still figuring out how to not be complete dicks to each other.
Yeah. How's that working out? No, I'm just kidding.
Well, yes, there's still a lot of work to do. There's still a lot of horrible, horrible things going on right now everywhere.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, this was fun. We went on all sorts of
I know. Sorry.
topics. I love it. That was great.
Thanks. Due to my neurodiversity, I took us off course a little bit. I apologize.
Carrie Haw, spokeswoman for neurodiversity. Awesome. Well, is there any final thoughts you would like to share with our vast audience? Although there might not be a lot of people listening right now, I have the sense that this podcast is about to take off, and so people will be listening to these back episodes.
I mean, I think to just, everybody to make time to slow down in their daily life, whether it's 5 minutes in the morning or before bed, to just kind of tune inward and, I think that's pretty much it. Oh, and if you have, for all those men out there listening, if you have female cousins in your life, include them in your home videos.
You mean like kids growing up? Include your sisters and
Yeah, and just don't exclude people in
don't
general,
exclude.
whether
Yeah.
it's a cousin because of gender, whether it's regardless of any reason. Try not to exclude others.
That's a nice message. That's a nice thought.
Yeah, it links into power. It's like learn how to use your power for the good.
Mm-hmm. I like it. I like it. Cool. Well, I guess we'll wrap up there. I'm gonna hit the road and go drive to the ferry. So thank you so
Love the
much.
ferry.
What?
Thank you. I said I love the ferry.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being my 16th guest, or well, at least not my 16th episode. And I'm sure we will do it again.
All right. It was a pleasure. Thank you for having me, boss man. You're
All
making up for lost time.
All right. All right. All right, Harasi. Until next time, this is Matt Reddy, aka Boss Man, and Carrie Haw, aka Harasi, signing off.
Bye.
All right, so I'm going to stop the stream. and then we just go from there and we talk about whatever we want. Although there is another, sometimes I talk about power, how you handle power struggles, and there's another, sometimes I talk about power.
Welcome to Quimper UU Fellowship. We hope you enjoy this recording from our July 3rd service. Matt Reddy's sermon topic is there an enemy? The music following the sermon is Allegro from Sonata Opus 40 No. 2 by Beethoven, performed by Pat Rogers. Thanks for listening.
So thank you all for being here today. For today's readings, I selected a couple of my favorite passages from Walden by Henry David Thoreau. I hope no one is too deeply offended, but I'm altering the text slightly to use gender-neutral pronouns. I don't believe it weakens the power. I think it enhances it a bit. I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, and see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not when I came to die, discover that I had not lived. I did not wish to live what was not life. Living is so dear. Nor did I wish to practice resignation unless it was quite necessary. I wanted to live deep and suck out all the marrow of life, to live so sturdily and Spartan-like as to put to rout all that was not life, to cut a broad swath and shave close, to drive life into a corner and reduce it to its lowest terms. And if it proved to be mean, why then to get the whole and genuine meanness of it, and publish its meanness to the world, or if it were sublime, to know it by experience and be able to give a true account of it in my next excursion. I learned this, at least, by my experiment, that if one advances confidently in the direction of one's dreams and endeavors to live the life which one has imagined, one will meet with a success unexpected in common hours. You will put some things behind, will pass an invisible boundary. New, universal, and more liberal laws will begin to establish themselves around and within you, or the old laws be expanded and interpreted in your favor in a more liberal sense. And you will live with the license of a higher order of being. In proportion as one simplifies one's life, the laws of the universe will appear less complex, and solitude will not be solitude, nor poverty, poverty, nor weakness, weakness. If you have built castles in the air, your work need not be lost. That is where they should be. Now put the foundations under them. Now I invite you to stand and join us in singing a song that's all about dreaming of a better world. That's a very passionate song that I really enjoy, and it's California Dreaming. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak here today. It is truly an honor. First time in my life doing something like this. It's an honor I've been fretting over for months now, so thank you for that too. It's given me yet another opportunity to learn how to deal with fear. Yet, I don't know why I should be afraid to speak here. This is one of the most welcoming and safe places I could possibly stand and speak. Even if I was a visitor and this was my first day here, I would feel safe because I've learned that Unitarian Universalist fellowships are a place where challenging and new ideas are welcome, creative thinking and individual perspectives are encouraged. I grew up not knowing about communities like this, But as an adult, knowing that they exist, it makes the world a more beautiful and wonderful place to be. So I thank you for being here and building and sustaining this amazing community. My life so far has been an amazing journey, and I hope it's not over anytime soon. I am endlessly grateful for all that I've experienced, the incredible gifts I've been blessed with, people like yourself I've had for companions and friends and allies. I've been blessed to have had the freedom and opportunity to live the life of a searcher and really an endlessly ambitious dreamer. I've spent most of my life believing there's one goal that I need to focus upon, and that goal is happiness. I've believed it's the duty of every person to nurture their life like they are the steward of a fruit tree. And we are to nourish and protect this tree that is our life so we might grow strong, and then we'd bear fruit that would then enrich the world. And this metaphor still very true for me. Yet over the past several years, my perspective has shifted. I found that life is not merely about the goal I seek, but I have felt forced to acknowledge there seems to be something in the universe that I am genuinely opposed to, an enemy, a thing I cannot ignore, and that I feel compelled to pay special attention to. This realization and my growing understanding of this enemy has helped shape my life, and so I want to share some of what I've learned about this with you today. To share this with you, I feel I must share with you some insight into my inner journey, some insight into the personal growth and transformation that has occurred within me and my emotions and my consciousness over the last few years. About 5 years ago, my life was in a crisis, a point where I was full of doubt and regret and truly unsure I was living the life that I wanted to live. In this moment of great anxiety and fear, I turned to a practice that had helped me many times throughout my life, and that's meditation, the practice of being still. For me, meditation is a very simple and natural thing. In fact, to me, meditation is like dancing. Dancing is an art that I believe has no absolute rules. You can dance any way you want, you can move any way you want, and as long as at least you believe you are trying to dance, then you are dancing. I will never look down upon a person who is moving to the music in whatever way seems right to them. Dancing is simple, pure, and beautiful in whatever form it emerges. I believe the same is true of meditation. Meditation, in essence, is simply a practice of stopping and being still. It's like pulling your boat to the shore, pausing the journey down the rapids of life and taking time to reflect, to feel, to see if there is anything you are missing while the world rushes past in our day-to-day lives. And though there are many structured techniques you might learn for meditation, just as there are many structured forms of dance, I prefer in both dance and meditation very little structure. I believe people are best served when they dance and meditate to the beat of the drummer that only they can hear. So 5 years ago, when I recommitted myself to a daily meditation practice, it helped me see where I was and where I wanted to go in this vast and wondrous universe. This practice helped me see with absolute clarity back in 2011 that I needed to join the Occupy Wall Street movement, to join with the people rising up to demand change to the injustice that has infected our country's government, and so I did. Really, for the first time in my life, I became an activist. I helped organize Occupy Port Townsend, and eventually helped facilitate dozens of activist meetings and protests here in our community and in other locations around the U.S. This same clarity led me to run for political office, helped guide me during the campaign, which is incredibly stressful. I think it's like giving a sermon every week, which I cannot imagine doing. And my practice of meditation continues to guide and support me as I swim through the filthy waters of politics as I hold office. The clarity from my meditation practice inspired me to travel to Hong Kong and bear witness to their struggle for democracy during their umbrella revolution a few years ago. It also guides me in several projects I'm working on that were mentioned earlier. In fact, I'd say every major decision in my life is not ultimately decided until it reveals itself to be the absolute right choice while I sit in silence on the shore of the river of life in silent meditation. So it was at some point in this journey over the last 5 years that I realized I am not simply pursuing happiness and fulfillment. It became clear I was opposing something. There is something both inside me and outside me that I am working against. And as I said, I felt compelled to understand this something. A meditation teacher I greatly respect is named Jason Siff, who perhaps some of you know. He has visited Port Townsend on several occasions. He wrote a book titled Thoughts Are Not the Enemy, which in many ways sums up his approach to meditation. He teaches that thoughts and thinking are too often taught to be avoided during meditation. And often, in a way, meditation practitioners start to think of their thoughts as an enemy, something to constantly push away. But he teaches thoughts are not bad. They are something to explore and to feel free to embrace during meditation. And I feel this is true also. As I said earlier, I don't believe in strict rules for meditation. But the title of the book helped me see the question I was trying to answer more clearly. Jason wrote, "Thoughts are not the enemy." And so it sort of begged the question to me, is there an enemy? In fact, I thought maybe even Jason was begging the question, saying thoughts are not the enemy, and yet there was an enemy. I even asked him on one occasion, but he said no, it was just a metaphor. He didn't have an enemy in mind. So I kept searching. So I began searching and meditating on this question, and I considered some of the obvious possibilities. Maybe it's anger, maybe it's hatred, maybe it's pain, suffering, sadness, discomfort, death, tragedy, lust, greed, laziness, fear. But for each of these, I concluded no. None of these things are my enemy. These dark and negative forces, they're all simply parts of life, parts of ourselves. These things come into your life like a relative showing up at your door. And like our relatives, some of these visitors are really unpleasant. Some we are tempted to say we hate. Some we are tempted to slam the door in their face and tell them to just go away. But all these emotions and experiences have things to teach us. And when these things arise within ourselves, they are showing us they are part of ourselves. And to hate these things when they arise in ourselves is the same as hating ourselves. And this is not the way. With all these negative and unpleasant emotions, I've learned to give them space to exist, to let myself experience them. In fact, the most unpleasant ones, I treat just as I hope to treat an unpleasant or annoying relative that visits. I allow them into my home when they show up at my door. I give them some of my attention, and then I gently, as soon as possible, help them move on and leave. I'm not rude, but I gently protect myself and my boundaries. Fortunately, most of my relatives live 3,000 miles away, so. But these dark and negative things I've named, fear, anger, hatred, greed, they are not an enemy. So I still wondered, because I felt there was something there. It felt like there is something I was opposed to. It feels like there is something that arises within me and around me in this world that deserves more forceful attention than fear, anger, greed, or sadness, and these other forces I've named. You treat an enemy differently than you treat an annoying or unpleasant thing. An enemy you stop at the doorway. An enemy you don't allow inside. Perhaps you are still gentle with the enemy. Perhaps you even love your enemy. But you give an enemy less room. An enemy you work to stifle and confine as much as possible in this universe. So then finally, something did become clear to me. An answer emerged from the fog of my mind, as it so often does during my meditation sits. Fear, anger, greed, sadness, and these other negative emotions, they're not an enemy, but when they overwhelm us, when they control us and dominate us, that is the enemy. When we cannot make the unpleasant relative or visitor leave our home, when they come inside and invade our space and we cannot get them to leave, that is the enemy. And that experience, when something is forced upon another and it cannot be escaped, to create enough space for that other to breathe and be comfortable, the word for that is oppression. At least the best word I've come up with. Oppression is the enemy. For me, oppression is the thing I am opposed to, and I realize this is as true for my internal life as it is for my external life. Now, of course, many unpleasant things in life we cannot escape. Aging, death, pain, tragedy. And like the Serenity Prayer says, it's our challenge to accept the unavoidable oppression of those things in life we cannot change. But for those things we can change, for those unpleasant things that suffocate and dominate and stifle us from living a full, flourishing life, we must find the strength and courage and tactics to not be oppressed by them. Oppression is my enemy. That was my revelation. And once I saw it, it helped clarify for me what I'm doing in this world. For oppression plays out differently in our internal world and our external world, although I believe it is very much the same and an enemy in both domains. In our internal world, we're each very much on our own. We can love and support one another as we each struggle with sadness, greed, fear, anger, but we cannot reach inside to the heart of another, to another's consciousness, and alleviate these forces. Many people, I believe, live their entire life oppressed by the forces inside their consciousness, such as people who suffer and lose the battle with addiction, or people who live a life dominated by fear or by greed. The greatest tool for fighting oppression within, for me, as I've mentioned, is meditation. The greatest tool I know that I can give to others for fighting oppression inside themselves is also meditation. And so I love teaching and talking about meditation whenever I'm invited to do so. And anyone here who wants to learn more about it, I will be happy to help you learn more. On the other hand, our relationship with oppression is quite different in our external world. We can work together to address oppression with much more effectiveness in the world at large, because together we create and alleviate oppression in this world by what actions we choose. Oppression is merely the abuse of power. And so the more we learn to see how power flows in any situation, in any social setting, the better we can each become at minimizing it. As I said before, I believe this fellowship, by its very existence, creates a place where less oppression happens. But we can always do better. Oppression is a subtle and nefarious foe. I believe societal oppression is a condition that runs in cycles in our world. I believe the history of humanity is basically a history of cycles of oppression, rebellion, and oppression again. Human history is the story of power being centralized in the hands of the few, and the few, be it kings, queens, oligarchies, elected governments, wealthy elites, or corporate executives. Over time, the few who have power will begin to abuse that power in more and more oppressive and horrendous ways. Eventually, the masses of people get so fed up with this oppression, they rise up. They rebel. They tear down the structures of power, and then, in an often messy struggle, they come up with some new power structure to replace it. And the cycle begins again. The holiday we celebrate tomorrow commemorates but one of many moments in human history where people tore down one system of power only to replace it with another. Sometimes effort is made to make the new power structure better, and less oppressive than the one that came before. But so far, I believe we have made only minimal progress as a global society. Many places on earth are so oppressive and horrible right now that I believe we're embarrassed to talk about what is happening. Because I think we all feel shame that we are living in a world where we allow some of the things to happen that are happening right now. The United States and other democracies in the world are indeed much less oppressive than those places where governments or other people can imprison, torture, and kill you without any due process or consequence. But our democracies have also devolved into pretty oppressive regimes where the few wield power over the many in oppressive ways. We live in a country where we claim to have a democracy, but all people are not equal. The super rich have more power than the masses. We teach our children that we have a democracy, but our leaders are selected by the more powerful and paid with legalized bribes to do their bidding, while the masses struggle to find honest leaders, to have rational discussions about problems that cause tremendous suffering and damage, such as war, healthcare inequity, education struggles, climate change. I know many of us simply throw our hands up in disgust and leave the power struggles to others. Oppression makes me sick. The abuse of power in our democracies makes me sick. When I read about the horrible abuse of women and children and men in various parts of our planet that goes on without any form of justice, I don't want to feel ashamed and powerless. I want to change things. I want us to find solutions to alleviate oppression everywhere. I believe there are good people all over this planet and in this room who want a better world than this, and I am crazy enough to think it is actually possible for us to make that world a reality. Indeed, I think we may be approaching another dramatic breaking point in the cycle of oppression in human history. We may, in fact, be approaching a time of change as dramatic as any revolution that has ever happened. And I wonder, and I dream, and I am constantly searching to find if we humans can finally come up with a way to use our collective power without it devolving into an oppressive hierarchy. This is a problem that I am very focused on in my projects outside of here. In fact, this is largely what I'm working on in my life right now, and I am crazy enough to believe I'm beginning to see a path to that world emerging from the fog of my mind. I don't know if humanity will ever fully stop the cycles of oppression, but I see no point in reaching for only the easy and reachable stars. If I'm going to aim for the sky. I am dreaming the impossible dream, and I am working to achieve that dream. And I know that it is people like you, communities like this where freedom of thought and belief are valued, where curiosity and questioning is encouraged, communities like this will always be a vital key to minimizing the powers of oppression in this world. So I know if we start to find the solution, I can count on many of you to be there at the forefront, to be marching in the streets or participating in whatever manner is best to help end oppression in our world. Because I know many of you, like me, are actively searching for that solution. So if you too are searching for that pathway to a better world, a world with less oppression, a world where every person has a real opportunity to live a vibrant, flourishing life, and you think you see something that I don't, or you want to learn more about what I'm doing, please come see me. Let us work together. Let us dream the impossible dream together. Let us build our castles in the sky, and let us work together to build the foundations underneath. Thank you all for being here today, being a part of this incredible community, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to share with you. And as Tennyson wrote in his poem Ulysses, "Come, my friends, 'tis not too late to seek a newer world. Push off and sitting well in order, smite the sounding furrows, for my purpose holds to sail beyond the sunset and the bays of all the western stars until I die. It may be that the gulfs will wash us down. It may be we shall touch the happy isles and see the great Achilles whom we knew. Though much is taken, much abides, and though we are not now that strength which in old days moved earth and heaven, that which we are, we are. One equal temper of heroic hearts, made weak by time and fate, but strong in will, to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield." Now, we extinguish this flame, but not the truth, not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.